Recording here. Kevon, I really thought the day would never come when you were interested in talking about veiling again, so this is a real treat.
Hey, don't. I just we don't need to go an hour.
All right, I have saved so many answers to so many objections. It's one of the best days of my life right now. This is an interesting question. I want to make sure that any sisters who are listening understand the full answer here, and I'm going to answer it, and you're going to be very satisfied because we have not one, not two, but three extra biblical Jewish sources telling us that Sarah veiled outside of the Bible, completely veiled herself. So scrupulously that even Abraham didn't get to see her that much. And they explain this exact situation and what happened. But I want everybody to understand what a veil is. Paul says that a woman ought to be kata that means just completely covered, completely hidden from top to bottom. But he doesn't say with a kaluma. He doesn't say the word kaluma necessarily right there. In some of the manuscripts he does. He says a woman ought to have a veil on her head, which is kaluma. But just generally, he gives a principle, which is a woman should be hidden. So this word kata it's just a verb that means hidden. Now, there are different ways to hide somebody. You can hide them with a veil, or you can keep them in a house all the time. And if you kept them in the house all the time, then they would be veiled. Have you guys ever thought about that? So you guys should consider this because some people wonder. I used to wonder too. Like, does my wife need to be veiled while she's indoors? This is all the confusion. Does she need to be veiled when she's praying? And she is veiled, guys, if she's inside of a house. Because the point of veiling is so that nobody else can see her. So if she's inside of a house, that means she is veiled. Did you know that? And did you know the Bible says that the house is a veil for a woman? For instance, in Sirach 23:18, it says, "A man who goes astray from his own marriage bed says in his heart, 'Who sees me? Darkness is around me, and the walls, look, kalupto me. No one sees me.'" So he's saying he's veiled by the walls of the house. So that is a veil. So was Sarah veiled when the Egyptians were looking for her? Yes, but not with a cloth veil. She was hidden inside of a chest. She was hidden inside of a box, according to the book of Yasher. I also want everybody to understand the situation. This is an extremely unusual situation. When we read this situation in Genesis, we should not read it all willy nilly and just go, "Oh, Abraham just randomly walks up to his wife and says, hey, Sarah, we're entering Egypt because of this famine. I think they might just murder me and take you from me. And that's just normal. That's just how people normally act these days." Oh, no, Peter is saying, we're entering a crazy territory. Or, I'm sorry, what did I say? Peter. Well, might as well be Peter. Now, Abraham says, we're entering crazy land here. It's Egypt. He knows that they are a perverse, wicked nation. He says, "I'm afraid they're literally going to kill us or take you away from us." And he says, in order to avoid them, killing me, if they do have that desire to just take you away, then just don't even mention that you're my wife, because I'm afraid that that's just going to be an instant death for me. Because I mean, you don't really leave the husband alive, guys. If you would just assume there's going to be a battle and they're going to have to fight off the husband and kill the husband so he doesn't come after his wife and all that. So, yeah, this is quite a distressing situation where they have to go to Egypt to get food, but he has heard that the Egyptians are extremely wicked people. So understand, guys, he knew that if he were just to veil her and just have her walking along with him, they were going to forcibly take her anyway. And when I was answering Brian the other day, and I said, "Well, I'll tell you what they would do, Brian. They would just take her and unveil her. They would unveil all the women that they felt like it. They would just say, 'Hey, we're going to take this woman if we want, that one.'" That may seem extreme, but guys, that's not extreme in comparison to literally being murdered. If you think that it's unlikely that they would be unveiling women, well, consider the fact that they actually would kill Abraham. That's what he's afraid of happening here. So they are extremely wicked, murderous people. Okay? Okay, now with that backdrop, let's read this. This is Book of Yasher, chapter 15. I'll zoom in a little so you guys can see what I'm saying. "And in that year there was a heavy famine throughout the land of Canaan, and the inhabitants of the land could not remain on account of the famine, for it was very grievous. And Abram and all belonging to him rose and went down to Egypt on account of the famine. And when they were at the brook Mitzraim, they remained there some time to rest from the fatigue of the road. And Abram and Sarai were walking at the border of the brook Mitzraim, and Abram beheld his wife Sarai, that she was very beautiful. And Abram, oh, by the way, in Jewish tradition, it says they actually had to take some of their clothing off in order to cross the river. And so that was when he noticed, oh, you are extremely beautiful. And Abram said to his wife Sarai, since God has created you with such a beautiful countenance, I am afraid of the Egyptians, lest they should slay me and take you away, for the fear of God is not in these places. Surely then you will do this. Say you are my sister to all that may ask you, in order that it may be well with me, and that we may live and not be put to death. By the way, I like how Yasher mentions she has a beautiful countenance. That word for countenance, guys, is always face. He says, surely then, they're going to see that you're very beautiful. And she just, she's unveiling. She had to take off, everybody takes off their clothes as they're crossing a river, so she's a little disrobed here. So Abraham commanded the same to all those that came with him to Egypt on account of the famine. Also his nephew Lot he commanded, saying, if the Egyptians ask you concerning Sarai, say she is the sister of Abram. And yet with all these orders, Abram did not put confidence in them, but he took Sarai and placed her in the chest and concealed it among their vessels, for Abram was greatly concerned about Sarai on account of the wickedness of the Egyptians. So already, Kevon and Brian, do you see how serious Abram is about hiding her from other people, especially these Egyptians? I mean, he doesn't even just veil her, he puts her in a chest. You see how extreme this is? And Abram and all belonging to him rose up from the brook Mitzraim and came to Egypt, and they had scarcely entered the gates of the city when the guards stood up to them, saying, give tithe to the king from what you have, and then you may come into the town. And Abram and those that were with him did so. And Abram with the people that were with him came to Egypt, and when they came, they brought the chest in which Sarai was concealed, and the Egyptians saw the chest. And the king's servants approached Abram, saying, what have you here in this chest which we have not seen? Now open the chest and give tithe to the king of all that it contains. And Abram said, this chest I will not open, but all you demand upon it I will give. And Pharaoh's officers answered Abram, saying, it is a chest of precious stones. Give us the tenth thereof. Abram said, all that you desire I will give, but you must not open the chest. And the king's officers pressed Abram, and they reached the chest and opened it with force. And they saw, and behold, a beautiful woman was in the chest. And when the officers of the king beheld Sarai, they were struck with admiration at her beauty. And all the princes and servants of Pharaoh assembled to see Sarai, for she was very beautiful. And the king's officers ran and told Pharaoh all that they had seen, and they praised Sarai to the king. And Pharaoh ordered her to be brought, and the woman came before the king. So they took her by force, guys. This is not just some nice, happy little reunion, nice little meeting between Abraham and Pharaoh. These guys are wicked. They're taking people by force if they like them. They're demanding, they're ransacking their belongings, it says, when people are just entering into the gates. So, not a typical situation, but let's read some more accounts about it. There is a scroll. There were 7 scrolls in the first cave at Qumran. We've had a call about this before, but we're going over it again. So Qumran is a bunch of these caves where they found a bunch of the most ancient manuscripts of the Old Testament. And of course it's got not only the books in the Protestant canon, but it also has a few other books. It also has the book of Enoch and a few shorter scrolls and a few longer ones. And among them, in those first 7 scrolls that they first took from the cave, the first cave that they found, there was a scroll which they ended up just naming the Genesis Apocryphon. It's very similar to the book of Genesis, but it's also extremely damaged. It is like an extended version of a lot of the things we have in Scripture, and it's kind of similar to the book of Yasher. You've got a lot of these histories, guys, these oral traditions that were passed down, and somebody eventually wrote them down, and so that's what we have here. So as you can see, this is a reconstructed, this is the text reconstructed. It's a mess, guys, as you can see. If you see any brackets, that just means that's a section that's lost, that's a section that's lost, so lots of missing sections. And Zone is in Egypt. In fact, I think that's even, let's see here, Zone in the Bible. Let's look this up. Zone refers to a city in the eastern Nile Delta of Egypt. So they're going to be talking about Pharaoh Zone. But anyway, here's the section in the Genesis Apocryphon. That's just the name they gave it. It's a scroll that had no name. So it talks about Abraham says he woke up from a dream in the night, says he's worried, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of missing sections in here. But he eventually tells her, wherever we go, just tell them that, say, he is my brother, and I will remain alive by your protection and survive thanks to you. And he says, they will try something, something to remove you from me and to kill me. And Sarai wept over my words that night, something, something. And Pharaoh's own, something, something, maybe he said or he asked Sarah or Sarai to go to Zoan. But she was very careful, or it says, for she was very careful with her person so that no one would see her. So this is the section that we saved from the Genesis Apocryphon. It says Sarai was very careful with her person so that no one would see her. I know it's kind of out of nowhere, guys, but hey, we take every bit of evidence we can. We hope it's helpful to you. Even though it's fragmented, there is a statement in this very ancient text which contains oral traditions that says Sarai was very careful so that nobody would look at her, nobody would see her. Now, whether this is talking about that specific instance in Egypt or if it's talking about it all the time, it's more up for debate among the skeptical, but for us, we are not skeptical. Why would we be skeptical about such a thing when all of the family members, the close family members, such as Rebecca, who is also in Abram's family, it's his brother's daughter, she is very scrupulous in her veiling. And when we see Tamar also being extremely careful in her veiling, face veiling and everything, and when we see all of Israel practicing veiling, every single Israelite practiced veiling, and they were the descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Jacob. We know that God says, if any woman is accused of adultery, she's to come before the priest, and the priest is to remove the veil from her head, and uses that word, apocalypse, which we know means completely revealing something that was hidden. So, guys, if that's saying every single woman who is accused of adultery is to have her veil removed, God is assuming and prescribing that every single woman in Israel is wearing a veil. So that's the descendants of these people, Abraham and his wife Sarah. Okay, but we've got another witness. We're going to read another one from good old the Targum of Jonathan. This is another oral tradition or a Jewish commentary. And you guys can read this online. This is Targum Jonathan, son of Uziel, section 3, chapter 12. So he's commenting and kind of extending the Old Testament text and adding some Jewish traditions. So he says, on the same situation of the famine, he says, and there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Mitzrayim, that just means Egypt, to be a dweller there, because the famine was strong in the land. And it was as he approached to enter the limit of Mitzrayim, and they had come to the river, and were uncovering their flesh to pass over, that Abram said to Sarah his wife, behold, until this I have not beheld your flesh. But now I know that you are a woman of fair aspect. It will be therefore, when the Mitzray see thee and view your beauty, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, and thee they will keep alive. Is this not a shocking statement, Brian and Kevon? Abram says, until now I have not beheld your flesh, but now I know that you are a woman of fair aspect, meaning you're beautiful. Some of you guys may be saying, huh? How could Abram not know that his wife is beautiful? Well, I have to reveal a shocking reality of ancient times, and especially righteous people who lived in ancient times. Guys, men and women who were righteous used to only have sex for procreation. They did not do it for pleasure. Abraham and his wife were like that. And other church fathers like Didymus the Blind and other commentators, they say Abraham had stopped having relations with his wife when he realized she was barren. He just accepted, okay, she's barren. They didn't do it regularly. And somebody may be saying, well, how could he not see his wife, though? Guys, I know it sounds crazy, but did you know in those days, and for a long time afterward, men only had relations with their wife when it was pitch black outside? It was dark. And no, they didn't turn on any lights inside their tent when they were having relations. They didn't want to, they just like, oh, I just need to see everything while we're having relations. No, they'd keep it pitch black. There was no light. So Abram literally never saw what his wife looked like without any clothing until at that time when they're crossing the river. And he was perfectly content with that. And I'll tell you guys, I'd be content with it too. I'd be content because it'd be easier, guys. When you're living with a woman and you're trying to be continent, that just means you're trying to control yourself. It'd be easier if your wife dressed modestly around you because then you wouldn't be constantly tempted. Because seeing your wife tempts you just as much, if not way more, than seeing beautiful women outside. When you have a woman to yourself, you're tempted to just have relations with your wife just for pleasure instead of to be productive. And these very modest, very self controlled people, Abraham and his wife Sarah, were so self controlled they only had relations for procreation. They didn't need to look at each other. They were embarrassed. They had this very innocent shame about them. Where like, oh, I don't want to see your private parts. Let's just do the deed and try to have a baby. And if we can't, you know, we're just gonna abstain. So this is a really great example to all of us of what sexual purity and continence, self control looks like. So, Kivon and Brian, hopefully that answers your question. That's three sources. Book of Yasher that says Abraham completely hid her from view. It's one of the Dead Sea Scrolls called the Genesis Apocryphon, saying Sarah was very careful with her person, not to let anyone see her, or no, very careful not to let anyone see her person. That's what it says. And then this third one is the tradition of Jonathan, who is a first century Jew, very famous, one of the oldest uh, oral tradition writers of all of Judaism. Let's see here. Jonathan, son of Uziel.
Feel like this makes the sin of the Egyptians look even worse.
Yeah,
Because
because
if Abraham scarcely seen his wife, this is such a terrible thing to do.
exactly. You got it, Dante. Not even Abraham himself goes and stares at his wife or has her take off her clothes around him. And yet other people would go and take her by force. It's even more evil when you realize how extremely modest they are. So Jonathan ben Uziel was a pupil of Hillel, the famous rabbinic sage of the 1st century BC slash 1st century AD. So he's living in the 1st century, somewhere around that time, 1st century BC, 1st century AD. That's this guy, Jonathan ben Uziel, or son of Uziel. So three witnesses. If I find any more, I'll add them to our list, but we've got three. Hopefully that's satisfying to people that Sarah did hide herself.
Yeah, that's a good enough explanation for me. Um, so another question I had, and this is more of a general thing. Do we have like any sort of timeline of events for like Abraham's journey? Because based on the ages that are given, unless when they were going through Egypt, for example, it was many, many, many years in the past. I'm surprised that like the Egyptians would view a 100-something-year-old woman as extremely beautiful.
Yes, it's very symbolic. God caused her to be that beautiful. And all of these things are symbolic, guys. Understand that even she is a huge symbol of the church. All of these women, the wives of the patriarchs, are symbols of the church, starting with Eve and going all the way down to Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the counterpart wife of Rachel, represents the Jews, the Jewish synagogue, and Rachel is the Gentile church. And then you go on to Moses. You have once again that that contrast of Moses' Ethiopian wife, and then she represents the Gentiles, and then the synagogue church is symbolized by Miriam, who was upset at Moses for taking the Gentile wife. Remember, it says that they murmured against Joseph because of his Cushite wife, or as it really just means she was black. She was Ethiopian. So yeah, Sarah here is a symbol of the church. She is the ancient church. She's the one that Pharaoh or Satan is always trying to take for himself, take away from Christ. And even though she is old and ancient, she is beautiful. She is very desirable to the devil and still desirable to Christ, but for her inner virtues. And Sarah's name even means wisdom. There's deep symbolism here, but yeah, it's miraculous, of course, that she's extremely beautiful even though she's 100 years old. God did that as a sign, as a symbol, really.
All right. And I guess this, as I'm thinking about it now, is more of a general question for the time period. But Hagar is given to Abraham as a wife from Sarah. Would like is she ac- actually considered his wife in the same way that Sarah is? And I guess that kind of goes for many people of that time who had multiple wives.
Well, a concubine is also called somebody's wife because Hagar is called both. She's called wife and concubine. But
Hmm.
you're asking a question of what is the difference between a wife and a concubine. You can be sure that both a wife and a concubine are both pledged to one man. It would be perverse if a concubine were to go and serve multiple men. That's not allowed. That's very perverted. But yeah, a concubine just has a lower status than a traditional wife because the concubine, she's there to bear children, and that's her main purpose. And I think we'd say the same thing about a wife, that she bears children for her husband, but she has more of a relationship
Why?
than that.
Okay. So would that so because Sarah gave Abraham Hagar for that purpose, is it then not considered adultery what he did because of that?
Well, it would be
Be-
adultery on her part if she was going to be with multiple men. But it's a different situation back then because they are doing it only for the sake of begetting children. He didn't go leave, he didn't go sneak into somebody else's house and have some relations with some random woman. It's her being given to him for the sake of bearing children. And of course, we know that this is not according to God's design. They didn't consult with God to do that. Nobody who ever had concubines consulted with God about it first. And we've talked about this a few times, Kevon, but God allows people to do certain things and experience the consequences of doing those things as a lesson for all people and a lesson for them, and also because of its mystical and prophetic value. So Abraham did that thing, and Abraham he wasn't happy about it in the end. He didn't go on and start teaching everybody, concubines are allowed, everybody imitate me. Instead, it was disastrous what happened. Hagar began to hate Sarah, and her son Ishmael began to hate Isaac. And if you read the scriptures and the father's commentary, it actually becomes clear Ishmael hated Isaac so much he wanted to kill him. So that's what happens when you're having children with concubines. It's what happened with Jacob, with his two wives, Rachel and Leah, and all the two maids that they were bearing children through. They all ended up hating the child of the legitimate, loved mother, Rachel. They all ended up wanting to kill Joseph. That's what happened. That's what happens when you have children of concubines growing up alongside children of the legitimate child, that there's strife among each other. So all these things are lessons to us. We were just talking about a few days ago, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating it all again, guys, but same thing goes for the kings being allowed to have concubines. David had concubines, and it was disastrous for him. A son of a concubine of David ended up overthrowing his kingdom and exiling David out of his own kingdom and seeking to kill him. And David had to run for his life. He was greatly dishonored and humiliated in the sight of all of Israel. And then his son went and took all of David's concubines and had relations with all of them in the sight of all Israel on the roof of the palace, just to humiliate his father. So that's what happened to David, and all of his concubines did not end well. Same with Solomon. When Solomon decided to have many concubines and many wives, what happened to him? It said he was led astray by his wives and even fell into idolatry. So, in all four of those instances, the Bible, by giving us examples, shows us that this is not something God approves of. But the one reason why God tolerated it with Abraham and Jacob was because, first of all, the men were not seeking it. Neither even were the women seeking just a lot of sexual pleasure. Abraham, if he was after sexual pleasure, he sure wouldn't have waited until he was 100 years old to take a concubine. He's kind of missing his prime time to have concubines, if that's why he was doing it. No, it's clear Abraham had great sexual control. Both he and his wife were very continent. But they had, again, this is why God allowed it, they had the sole purpose of wanting to bear children. And it was the same with Leah and Rachel, that they just wanted to give children to their husband. So when they found themselves to be barren, they said, then go into our maids and use them and bear many children. So their intentions were pure. It was in service to their husband. They saw their whole existence as being about bringing up children for their husband. Not just having the child, but also teaching the child. Perhaps that would be one of the main distinctions between a wife and a concubine, is that the wife has control over the children. The concubine is not the one who raises it, but the mother raises all the children and instructs them and is considered the legitimate wife, whereas a concubine was an assistant in bringing children into the family.
Okay. The main reason I asked was as I was going through Genesis again, I got to where Abraham um sent Hagar and his son away, and the translation I used, it used the word wife when talking about Hagar. So I had the
Mm-hmm.
thought of like, oh, this is a very harsh way to treat someone you would call your wife. So that's why I was like, is there a big difference between? I mean, I know I could tell like kind of intrinsically that Sarah was above Hagar, but I didn't know to what extent.
All of it is given to us for a symbolic lesson. All these stories are useless to us if we just have the story of the man in his relationship with the slave, but it's symbolic of Israel, who hated the legitimate son of Abraham. They hated Christ. And so by hating him and seeking to kill him, they were rejected by God. God sent away Hagar. He sent away the Jews. He sent away their children with, Ishmael, and rejected them because they hated his son.
Gotcha. And the last thing was what I messaged you earlier today. If you found anything on
Oh,
that.
and they hated the Gentiles, which is symbolized by Sarah. They hated both Christ and they hated the Gentiles. And what was the other thing, Kavan?
What I sent you earlier today, the message that I sent you.
Um, and what was that? Jog my memory.
Yeah, it was. Let me go back. Oh, it was how who, to my understanding, we believe to be Jesus and those two angels, and they appeared to Abraham. Abraham was able to have conversations with them. If I remember correctly, he even wrestled with uh with Jesus at some point.
Jacob. Yeah,
Hmm?
Jacob.
Oh, was it
Jacob,
Jacob?
the
Um,
angel of the Lord. Yeah.
okay, I'm mixing that story up then. But regardless, um, that compared to when Jesus appeared to Moses, and Moses couldn't even look at him straight without dying. Like you said, like at most you could look at my back. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been quite a while since I've gone through it.
Yes, the church fathers do talk about this, Kavan, and I only wish I remember all the details because one of the church fathers we were reading, I've read it multiple times. He lays out a kind of a succession of visits of God on the earth, and he talks about how early on Jesus used to walk with Adam and Eve in the garden, just walk and talk with them, and speak with them as friends regularly, and that he used to appear all the time on the earth. But as time went on, appearances and meetings with Jesus in person became less and less frequent. Until finally, thousands of years later, you get to the time of Moses, and he does show glory. He does appear in a flame of fire, and it's very glorious, but he still is hiding. And he doesn't let Moses see, his face, except when it's shining, it's burning. And Moses has to hide himself. Yeah, it's a progression over time, I meant to say. A progression of God being more and more distant. But we should not see Moses as missing out completely and speaking to God. It says in the scriptures, on the one hand, that Moses had to hide himself, but it also says that they spoke face to face. So it's kind of interesting. They did speak to each other right in each other's presence, and so
Luke,
that
Tertullian talks about
is it
that.
Tertullian I'm thinking of who talks about that progression of people over the Old
No, no,
Testament.
no, no. What you just mentioned about Moses seeing God face to face, because he did. Remember the transfiguration on the mount?
Yep, but they couldn't look for very long at it.
Yeah, but they saw it.
Yeah, they saw it, but they just couldn't look for very long. You can't really look at the sun in the sky for very long, so it's probably the same thing. Yeah, not quite the same face to face as the Old Testament, because in the New Testament, or I'm sorry, as I meant to say, as in Genesis. But there in Exodus, he is still speaking to them. He's just got his glory activated, and so you really can't stare at him for very long. So that's both a privilege and also a downgrade, because you would hope that you could actually just speak to him face to face without getting your face blown off by the glory. But he wished to glorify himself and show himself in his splendor so as to wow the Israelites.
All right.
Yep, but they give a better explanation of that, Kavan. Maybe Nolan or Aramis could find that section I'm thinking of.
Okay. Well, if you are able to find it, feel free to send it over to me. But that was the last of my questions. Apologies for all of the questions regarding uh Genesis.
Well, my
I
favorite
didn't
thing,
have someone to ask when I was going through it initially.
my favorite thing is when you guys ask me questions I know the answer to. But I think Nolan probably remembers it. If he were in here, he'd be telling it to you.
Oh,
I forget
maybe I'll
exactly. Yeah, I forget exactly what the point was.
yeah, maybe I'll send him over the message then.
Yes, do that.
All right. That's all for me. That's all my questions.
I've got a question. Um, we were Abraham and Dante were talking and reading through. There's Tertullian talks about the soul, and he's saying, oh, there's like humans have a different soul from animals, and that um like when God breathed into man, that was his soul, right? Uh, but I had this conception before that what was being breathed into man was the spirit, and there's a couple quotes from Irenaeus that implies that it's the spirit that sets humans apart, like he says in he says in book 3, chapter 22. He says, but everyone will allow that we are composed of a body taken from the earth and a soul receiving spirit from God. And then elsewhere, he also talks about if the spirit be wanting to the soul in a human, he who is such is indeed of an animal nature, being left carnal, and shall be imperfect. So it's like implying, okay, so maybe animals don't have spirits, like a spirit like humans do. But so we were trying to like figure out how could these be harmonized, and would is that thing breathed from God like the spirit, and it's Tertullian just using a different word to describe the same thing?
It would be
Um,
it would be helpful to pull up the original language, because we have noticed more than once, both in the scriptures and in the fathers, that when they make translations, sometimes they say soul when the original language is saying spirit, and sometimes they say spirit when the original language is saying soul.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
double check before you suspect any contradiction, because we've had more than
Yeah.
one contradiction resolved just by finding out that the translator was messing with us and didn't even know the difference.
I guess it could be a translator thing. I mean, we were discussing that it seems in some places in like the Old Testament. I mean, I don't know how true this is. I could be wrong on this, but it seems like soul and spirit are sometimes used interchangeably. Uh, but like this distinction is clearer later on. So I just assumed that like, oh well, even if he's using a different word, he's talking about essentially the same concept. So it's not actually a contradiction. That was kind of my. But Raheem has more of the quotes. I don't know if Raheem, you want to pull those up because he was reading. He's been reading lots of Tertullian, so he knows exactly. But
Sure, if
yeah,
you want to
like
post any, I'll take a look at them.
yeah, like there's a few that we're talking about the souls of like man are different from the souls of animals. But there's another quote here from Tatian. This is what made this interesting is that he then uses the word spirit. He says, okay, in Address to the Greeks, chapter 12, he says, we recognize two varieties of spirit, one of which is called the soul, and the word there is suke, but the other is greater than the soul. And an image and likeness of God both existed in the first man. So I think, okay, that's the other he's speaking about is the spirit, right? But the first kind, he then goes down and he says there is a spirit in the stars, a spirit in angels, a spirit in plants and waters, a spirit in man, a spirit in animals. But though one and the same, it has differences in itself. And although he's using spirit there, I my
Yeah, he's made it clear that
I
he's associating it with the idea of a soul.
yes, I think that exactly. So I'm thinking, um, like just comparing that with what Tertullian was saying. Uh,
That is a really
I
interesting
think
way of looking at it. How he
yeah,
said the spirit, the part of your the part of you that is the spirit. Both of them are spiritual, but one of them is called the spirit. Is the image of God. What did he say again about it?
yeah. Uh, one of which is called the soul, but the other is greater than the soul, an image and likeness of God.
So
Both existed in the first men.
that's really interesting. I think that clarifies some things for me because we have all heard the fathers repeatedly say that the spirit is the good part of you and that it speaks to
Mm.
you what's good for your soul. It knows what's best for your soul and makes suggestions to the soul of what it ought to do and how it ought to think. But an even better way of summarizing that concept is just to say that the spirit is the template or that picture, that outline of how you're supposed to be, and it's the version of you that I don't know, almost like laying out a picture, and then your soul is this other picture being laid on top of it, and your soul is not necessarily resembling that perfect image, but you're supposed to kind of lay it out and stretch it out where it needs to be stretched in order to line up on all the edges and fulfill that outline. So you could think of your spirit as the template of who you're supposed to be. It is that image of God. It's untainted, it's perfect, and you're supposed to be aligning yourself with that.
Yeah,
But your soul has many blemishes. All of us have many blemishes. So we're always having to look at that. It's almost like a mirror.
right. It's just it's yeah, it's the perfect. It's like the perfect ideal of the self.
And we know that
But yeah, yeah,
it's taken away after we die. It goes back to God. So there's no more comparison. There is no more being tugged on by that opposite good part of you.
mm,
And when I say opposite, I mean that it's standing parallel to you. It's something for you to aspire to and attain. I don't mean that it's the opposite, like it's good and you're just automatically evil. I just mean it's something you always have accompanying you. pulling you toward itself.
Right. Yeah, and well, and how the way Irenaeus describes it, that it's like it is in the soul is a body taken from the earth and a soul receiving spirit from God.
Hmm.
So, like in some way, it's kind of interfacing the soul. I mean, we envisioned it. It's called the inner man. So, like it's as if it's within the soul. So, um,
Yes, deep
I
in the
was
soul,
thinking,
they say.
yeah. So I guess I'm thinking, well, Tertullian using soul there also, like if he means it like soul as in the word suke, it might be a different word, but if it's in that sense, I think there still is he's still making a point that, well, yeah, it is different from the souls of animals because they don't have this spirit, conscience within their soul that is making them in the image of God. That's kind of that was the that was a conclusion I came to.
Yes,
But I have to, yeah.
yeah, Philo has some really profound things to say about the soul, if I could find that section. We know that a lot of the fathers read Philo, and I think Philo's observations are extremely profound. But yeah, Origen says just very bluntly in his commentary on Romans that your spirit is your conscience.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're putting together quotes on that subject. I think Origen has the most quotes on the subject where he elaborates on it the most. At least the spirit part. Plenty of church
Right.
fathers talk about the soul, but not as many talk about the distinction between it and the spirit. Yeah, don't forget
Okay.
that Tertullian is also writing in Latin, so there may be a little bit of discrepancy or not quite a perfect carryover of words to the Greek when he's written.
Yeah, that could also be the case.
So
Let's see.
check the language when you're reading.
Oh yeah, and the other element. Okay, so from a Tertullian, I was looking at the quotes Raheem was sharing. One of them was here Tertullian said, "And that you may more readily understand this, consider first of all from your own self, who are made in the image of and likeness of God. For what purpose is it that you also possess reason in yourself, who are a rational creature, as being not only made by a rational artificer, but actually animated out of his substance?" And I was thinking, well, this must be talking about like the spirit part, but there's other places where he uses the word soul. Um, but I was thinking, well, okay, there's other we've talked about this before, like that the spirits in us are like, well, God's creating the spirit, but um, is it like, I mean, if he's breathing, is it sort of like he's uh like literally it's coming out of his substance, but then it's sort of it's it is then I don't know how to describe it. It is then made distinct. Like I was thinking about like the fire from fire analogy, but then it just becomes like a separate fire. So it's like still has God's substance, but it is not like uh, it's not something that's actually co-eternal. I'm not sure if that would be how to understand this, but he seems to be yeah he seems to be saying that this part in us is like is coming from God's substance.
Yep, some of those church fathers say that. I know more than one says that we have the spark of divinity in us, which I think is the spirit. And I think it's also just our soul, that our soul is similar to God.
Hmm.
That's an
Okay, yeah,
interesting
that was
question,
against.
though, Adriano. That well, it's the idea of is something eternal if it comes out of God, and I think it is. It has some kind of how it says that in Wisdom of Solomon that God made us in the image of His own eternity.
Yes.
I mean, if you come out of something that is eternal, even if you came out at a point in time, you are you're coming out of something eternal. It did happen in a point in time, but it's just like with fire. If you take fire from more fire, that new fire, it is new, it's a new flame, but it came from a flame that existed before it. So,
Right.
in a way, it is pre existent. But I mean, now we're prying into things, Adriana, that are way too deep for us, and I don't know if it's fruitful. It's very enjoyable to talk about things, but I just don't know if we can. I don't know how far we can go in any of our speculations.
Yeah, well, there's only so much. He said this in Against Praxis, chapter 5. Uh, yeah, but I bring this up because I remember hearing a while ago from someone else, some other person online, but they were kind of or I had this impression that like there's something similar with the Holy Spirit and the spirits in men, but yet there is uh, a distinctness because the Holy Spirit joins with our spirit. But I feel like it can almost make sense that because they're of like a similar or a same kind of substance, but one is just like it's breathed out and made distinct, where the other is always co-eternal with God, and so they're able to like come together in that union. Just it's very speculative, but
I don't know. I don't know if that's correct.
okay. I'm just looking through these quotes. Raheem, I don't know if you have any other thoughts because you were sharing these quotes, but I'm seeing here. Okay, yeah, and he was refuting Hermogenes. Trying to find one that's easier to understand because sometimes they're confusing.
Yeah, this is a great section from Tatian.
Yeah, that was a good. Dante showed me that. That was a good quote.
The main question we were trying to tackle was like, do animals have spirits? Luke?
They have something. They certainly have some kind of soul. Philo says that he compares it to eyes, and he says all of us have eyes, but there's two parts of the eye. There's the white part, and then there's the pupil in the middle. And the white of the eye doesn't really do the seeing. It's the pupil in the middle that does the seeing. And he says in the same way, animals have a soul, but humans have the soul of the soul. He says they have a soul of a soul, something deeper. So that does sound more like he's talking about the spirit.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you want to go, Dante?
I was gonna say that there's a passage from Clement that reminds me of. Send it.
And he also
Clement of
says that the
Alexandria.
main distinction between our souls and the animal souls is it's a good analogy. The eye is a good analogy because the soul, like the eye, is able to see God. It's able to comprehend its creator. But an animal cannot comprehend God's existence. It doesn't actually think about that or contemplate its existence, contemplate anything. It's just driven by instincts. But humans can contemplate everything, contemplate morality, their relationship with God, their ultimate purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess
As
the
it was,
different. So go ahead, Reem.
yeah, that was like the main. That was one of the ideas that we came to because we read some quotes from Tertullian that talked about humans being the only rational animal, right? And we got into the soul, like what is it that makes us different from the animals? Because Adriano like was asking, and I remember you saying something about animals having some type of soul, but what's different between our soul and theirs? And we got a couple quotes from Tertullian, and Tertullian talks about how when God breathed into man, he became a living soul. Um, so we were speculating, I guess, or and
Yes.
we were laying down the evidence to see that. Well, what if if it's like God breathing, like if it's God's afflatus that makes our soul different from the animals, um, so is it like, I guess you were asking then if the difference between us and animals is because we have that afflatus within us of God that makes us rational, that makes us yeah, that makes us rational. That's the difference between us and animals. That we have this afflatus within us. We have
Yes,
this breath.
and also that we're eternal. Animals are not eternal. Animals were not created in the image of his own eternity, like we were just pointing out. So perhaps that's another aspect of it. Consider, not that I'm any kind of theologian or that I could ever even come to any conclusion apart from some much wiser instructor, but since you're all speculating with me, I will speculate as well. We know that God says that a person who is in sin and who lives according to the flesh and who doesn't know their Maker is spiritually dead. He calls that person dead. So perhaps an animal, in some similar way, is the opposite of the image of God's eternity, but he is spiritually dead because he has no spirit that comprehends God. So, in that way, when it talks about Adam becoming a living soul, a Zoe or a psyche that is Zoe, just a soul that is alive, perhaps the emphasis is more on the fact that he is a living soul, not so much that he is a living soul. But to be a living soul would mean one that is spiritually alive and cognizant of their creator, whereas an animal is more of a dead soul that is not eternal.
And so the living part is the spirit that is making it living.
Yes, it's the spirit that gives life, as Jesus says.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That Tertullian must be in a way referring to that, but he's talking about like the soul itself in man. Maybe the way our soul is capable of receiving spirit from God.
Yes, I
Yeah,
firmly believe that souls of animals are snuffed out right after they die, just like a wind, just like a vapor.
you mentioned that Philo thing, and it reminded me of the quote I sent from Clement. I sent it in the chat.
Right here, let me take a look at it. Clement says, plants have a nature, and the irrational animals possess impulse and perception, and likewise the two characteristics already specified. But the reasoning faculty, being peculiar to the human soul, ought not to be impelled similarly with the irrational animals, but ought to discriminate appearances, and not to be carried away by them. So he just means that humans can look at things and not just see, not just observe, but contemplate things that they see.
So can you go to that message that I tagged Adriano in because I'm on my phone so I can't do it. Can you read the parts that are highlighted?
Yes, I will right now. This was from a few days ago. He says, and with him agrees everyone who gives a share to all animated beings of the animal substance, which according to our view exists in man alone as this or as his special property, not because it is the work of God, which all other creatures are likewise, but because it is the breath of God, which this human soul alone is. Yeah, certainly God did not breathe on every single animal and cause them to become a living soul in that way. So the breath, or the pneuma, the spirit, that comes directly out of God into man, but the souls simply become alive by God speaking it, and they came out of the dirt.
And I think Tertullian also says that when we sin, we lose all rationality because sinning is like going against rationality. You're irrational, like the animals.
Well, you've given me a much better understanding of what all these church fathers mean when they talk about the image of God. I have a huge collection of quotes growing. The first reason for collecting it was to refute the Catholics about images, because they will look at a lifeless picture. They'll claim that is the image of God, and they'll say God commands you to love his image, And so they think that means love a picture. But there's so many church fathers saying the image of God is alive. It's within you. And now I'm starting to see more than ever that it's that reminder within you of what you're supposed to be, namely what God is. And so you're supposed to match up that perfect image. And the church fathers even say that the image of God is not specifically God the Father, but it's actually talking about Christ. And it's not so much talking about Christ existing as a man before all other human beings, but that the perfect image, which is Christ, is actually something that exists later in time, which we're supposed to match up with, even though it didn't exist until thousands of years had gone by. Nevertheless, it is still an image which Christ created from the beginning. It's the perfect template of a human being that we're all supposed to be aspiring to. And so it's already within us, which we call our conscience. It's already there as a template that we're supposed to be seeking after and trying to make ourselves resemble. So the image of God is this immaterial thing, it's not a physical thing. And the image of God is clearly very associated with the Spirit, which no animal possesses. No animal possesses the image of God, they don't possess the Spirit. They have no aspiration to become like God. It's impossible for them.
I've also been collecting quotes on image of God. So yeah, I think I have quite a bit now, but I'll keep going.
Let's combine forces. I've got a lot of post-Nicene stuff, Brian. If you've got a lot of pre-Nicene, we can combine it.
Let me look right now. I mean, let's see. Image. Okay.
This is something that uh, Gregory of Nyssa has a whole writing on, right? Or I watched the YouTube video. That guy John Bear has done some presentations on Gregory of Nyssa's human image of God and the, what it means to be a true human. I guess like Christ is the last Adam, as he's the he's the true, the full Adam, the true man. And because we're in the body of Christ, um, being in the image of God, we're like literally like in Christ. um, I I don't have the whole picture yet, but I could see a lot of connections with that.
You, I was listening to the audiobook on the channel from Origin's commentary on John. This was a while ago. And yeah, that actually clicked for me when I was listening to that book. And I have come across other, pre-Nicene or Ante-Nicene church fathers mention that it is in the image of Christ. And it clicked for me when I was listening to the audiobook because, Christ is the image of God, and it says that man is made in the image of God. So it literally says it in Genesis because Christ is the image of God, and man is made in the image of God.
Being we're made in Christ.
Yeah.
Tertul- Tertullian, like he outright says it. Um,
Irenaeus says it too. I have it right here. I'll post it.
And that's why he's the firstborn of all creation, because all
do you
creation
remember
is.
the? Yeah, do you remember like that allegory that I was like speculating on when um Adam the bone was taken out of Adam's side to create Eve. Eve is kind of like in the image of Adam in a sense, but she's of a lesser authority. And I thought, in a way that's us, we're the image of Christ, of a
Exactly.
lesser authority.
Right. We're not the image of God the Father, we're the image of Christ. Now, Christ is the image of the Father, but notice how there's a progression here of subordination. That the Son is subordinate to the Father, man is subordinate to the Son, and woman is subordinate to man. And her direct authority is the man, just like man's direct authority is the Son, and the Son's direct authority is the Father. So it's a succession of authority. And we must also remember what God means when he says, let's make him in our image. Adam has a unique place as the ruler over the earth. God says, let him have dominion over all of creation. And Eve does not have dominion over all creation. She has dominion over almost all of creation, but there's one thing in creation she does not have dominion over, and it's her husband. So, in that way, the fathers say she is not completely in the image of God because of the fact that she's not over all of creation. She must submit to her husband. But on the other hand, some of them say as long as she is joined to her husband, as long as she is a helpmate to her husband, then together they are a single unit that does rule over all creation. And so, in that way, she is the image of God. But she still has to see her husband as being the more perfect and complete image of God.
It's an interesting sort of reflection of like the Trinity, where like the Son being subordinate to the Father, but there's this they have this union, this unity of operation, and have the same substance, and it's this like they're total, like they're together and they have one act together, but it is the Father who's the head. So like marriage, man and woman becomes one flesh, but the husband is the head, and of course they're of the same substance, but they can only be, you know the woman can only be like with the man ruling over the rest of creation as long as she's with the man. Just like the Son is only God because he is God of the Father. That's an interesting parallel.
Luke, I don't mean to cut you off, Adriano, or get in the way of the conversation. Uh, do you want me to just put this in a document and send it to you,
Sure.
or would I put it in?
We have
Okay.
time. I'm just in no hurry. Brian, you can if you want to, but you know me, I just take forever to do things. Kavan knows I take a long time to do things.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Give me time. I just say it's fine, guys. Just start collecting stuff, and we'll get it all out eventually, and no rush.
All right. I'll wait then.
No, you can do it right now.
Oh. Okay.
Hey, or never mind. I'm gonna look up. Look up something in the dictionary.
Luke, what's your progress been on the past week?
Oh, it's all
Game
right.
over.
It's all right. Things are doing well. You just
What's all
focus.
right?
You just focus on
Now,
Easter.
I mean, there's not much to focus on. I'm booked and scheduled. I'm just waiting. In a way, I'm focused on Easter because you said you should be done by the time it comes around.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm feeling very
Is that
confident.
is that still a realistic goal for you?
Um. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What'd you do today, Luke?
I've been productive the entire day. I'm never unproductive. Aramis can see what I do all day long. Am I unproductive?
I'm not accusing you of being unproductive. It's just what
I'm
productive
I'm
things.
productive in all the wrong ways.
So you didn't work on it at all today.
Not today.
What about yesterday?
Um. Um. I think the day before that I did.
Right.
I'm in the second draft phase. Every writer goes through the second draft phase. Everything looks so nice. You feel so confident. You're just doing little tweaks here and there.
How about you commit to setting aside an hour each day at minimum to work on it?
That is a good idea. 1 hour a day,
Because
Hermes. Are you listening?
because when there's something that I know I should do, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to it, but like in the back of my mind, I don't really want to do it. If I don't set a time, I'm not going to do it. So set a time in your head. Be like at six p.m. every day, I'm going to spend an hour on the novel, so that I can have it done by Easter.
That's a good idea.
Yep. So implement it. I'm gonna ask you tomorrow if you did it.
All right. I can do that. I'm not busy tomorrow. Aramis, am I doing anything tomorrow? Oh. Might have to go with Aramis for a walk tomorrow.
Walks don't take that long.
Oh, Aramis walks do.
You can find an hour.
I can do an hour. You're right. No problem. I can do that.
I sent a quote of the image of Christ thing. I'll just read the bolded part. But Clement of Alexandria says, "Let us make man in our own image and likeness, and in truth Christ became the perfect realization of what God spake, and the rest of humanity is conceived as being created merely in his image," referring to Christ.
Wait, Dante, is this like saying the Father speaks to the Son, let us make man in our image, but then he goes on to say, in the image of God, he created him. So like the he would be Christ? Christ creating man
Tertullian
in
said the same
his
thing.
image?
Yeah, that's what it is.
So that's why because it yeah, in the image of God, he created him, man. So Christ created man in his image. It's kind of what it's getting at, right?
Yeah.
When it says that
But
in Genesis. What verse is that? That's like Genesis 1 26 or something, of course.
I think so.
Genesis 1:26. Brenton. We have verse 26. And God said, let us make man according to our image and likeness. Okay. And God made man according to the image of God, he made him. So if God made man and Christ is the one who made man, according to the image of God, he made him. So it's God who is Christ
I
creating
mean,
man in his image.
it is both because it is Christ being the image of God the Father, us being in the image of Christ. We are in the image of God the Father as well through
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah.
So again, Christ is God and He created us, but God the Father works through Christ. So God the Father through Christ created us. So there's a kind of, but yeah, the He. I mean, you could say it. You could say for either or both of them, really. Like there's no separating Father and the Son in
Oh
that
yeah,
passage.
I know that it is. I mean, I know Barnabas says that it's God the Father speaking to the Son in verse 26 and all the other church fathers, but I just mean like in verse uh 27, because I know that the Father and the Son like made man, but just trying to like maybe change the words a little bit to maybe make it more understandable, like, and God made man. So I'm thinking like, and Christ made man according to the image of God. I mean, Christ is the image of God, so the image of God that Christ created man in was his own image. I feel like I'm being confusing.
I think you could just. I think you could apply that. You could God here could be referring to the person of the Father still, but Christ is actually there doing it physically. You could say like He's physically forming man on Earth. You could view it in that way, but the Father is doing it through Him. So you could still have the Father. I mean, it's always again they always work together, but it is the Father's will, right, that is being actualized through his hands, his Son and his Spirit. Um, so
The
you
quote I
could
sent.
go ahead.
That's a long quote, Raheem.
I was just saying the quote I sent is it's saying what you just said from Clement. Clement says, "Nor is the cast and the character of the life he enjoins very formidable, nor is it made altogether easy by reason of his benignity. He enjoins his commands, and at the same time gives them such a character that they may be accomplished. The view I take is that he himself, he's referring to Christ here, that he himself formed man of the dust and regenerated him by water and made him grow by his spirit and trained him by his word to adoption and salvation, directing him by sacred precepts in order that transforming earthborn man into a holy and heavenly being by his advent he might fulfill to the utmost that divine utterance, and then goes into that, but he's
Hmm.
referring to Christ here.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
like in the
Yeah.
direct sense, it's always Christ. It's the Son, the wisdom, who is working there. But again, wherever the Son is, the Father is. So it's yeah.
Okay, this is completely okay. This is maybe off topic, but Dante, as you're reading that quote, it made me think of something. I want to get your thoughts, like everyone here, maybe what you guys think. But uh, so in that quote there, Dante, doesn't he mention that man was created from the earth, regenerated by water? When he's talking about, was he talking about Adam there? Of course, right? He's talking of Adam
He is referring to Adam being formed from the earth, but
from the earth.
regenerated by water, that might be referring to baptism. I think he's referring to baptism there.
No, yeah, I understand that, but the point I was just thinking is that I mean, science. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably true that, or self-explanatory. I don't know. They say that man is made up of mostly water, like 70% water or something. So I was just thinking, like man being created from dust, but being made up of water, to have his being, to be alive, or
You're trying to
then
connect that to the soul or the
baptism.
spirit.
No, I'm trying to connect it to baptism. Like somehow, like that's what completes a man, or what gets him like spiritually like alive.
Oh boy, I think we
I
may,
don't know.
I think we may be getting a little too far in there, guys. You can't start pointing to the like. Oh man, at some
I
point the
know.
symbolism is lost if you start
I'm just
folding.
I'm looking at this. The view I take is that he himself formed man of the dust and regenerated him by water. Well, okay, and then made him grow by his spirit. This
He's
seems like
referring
this is
to.
like talking. Well, what do you think, Dante?
Oh, you can go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, yeah, it seems like this is like the making man, even the process through history. He's growing by the
Yes.
Spirit, and the end is to be regenerated in water through baptism. I think that's
yeah.
always it's like on the way to becoming fully human is our being regenerated by the water, right?
I no. I assumed that it was talking about baptism there. It made
Hmm.
sense, but I don't know. I was just throwing out like some random speculation. Luke was right. I was just throwing out something random about Adam, just trying to. I don't know. I was just speculating about random things that I have no clue about if it's right or wrong.
I mean, as long as you preface that this is something I have no clue about.
Don't want to be excommunicated. I'm just kidding. I know that you can't.
I have wondered about the 70% water thing.
I
They've
mean,
got.
the
I was
the
I'll
wondering
tell you
about
what
it,
it
thought about
symbolizes. It symbolizes that you have baptism inside of you, inside of your body. No, guys. I mean,
I
I feel like we're going way too far here. Like, I'm not sure how to even articulate what kind of a crazy logical fallacy it is to go that far in saying water always symbolizes baptism, and then that's inside of us, or something like that.
I remember just
it.
broadly there is just a significance with water, the fact that water is
But
so intrinsic to life.
yes, but
I mean,
it's
water symbolizes life, so it makes sense that through water we're regenerated with the Spirit to eternal life.
Luke, but didn't you know that the number seven is used all throughout Scripture, and it's maybe a complete number? And if man is 70% water, mm,
please. That's what I'm talking about here.
I love it. What's the gematria for water in Hebrew?
it's like some kind of fallacy. Like I don't even know how to articulate it. It's like saying, you know, hey, we need to take some water in case we get thirsty, and then somebody says something like, my body's 70% water. I've got plenty to take along with me. Like it's some kind of bizarre like folding things on itself and completely contradicting the entire meaning, the original meaning. It's like trying to find symbolism. Like, oh, I know how to articulate now. You're destroying the literal meaning of the original thing, and now there can be no symbolic meaning of it because you made everything symbolic, and there's no ground to stand on anymore. The flesh represents the flesh. It's like that one time. I won't say who said this, but they were saying that blood symbolizes the flesh. It's like, wait, what?
Wait,
Yeah, that's a,
I,
that's a weird
my
one.
brain has been
that's
smashed.
funny.
It's been crushed and twisted, and I don't even know what to do anymore.
Wait, where did he go after that?
Blood is part of the flesh. No, but I do think the blood symbolizes your soul, and your breath symbolizes the spirit, and they are mixed together. God causes oxygen to be pumped into the blood, and when that happens, well, I think they're mixed together in the same way that soul and spirit are mixed together.
Well, we got to make everything allegorical. Like, come on.
Well, clearly
I'm just
those
kidding.
things
I'm
are
just,
allegorical. Those things
yeah.
are. I mean, God made a symbol of the blood. That when you get killed, the blood comes out of you and it hits the ground and it sinks into the earth. That symbolizes your soul going down to Hades. And
Mm.
then your breath comes out of your body, and that symbolizes the spirit going back to God.
How about this? The earth is brought forth from water, right? And when we're born, I mean, before we're born in the womb, we're all around water, fluid, and we're brought out of water. So it's like it's got to be symbolism there as well.
Yet being submerged in water has some kind of symbolic meaning, but I don't know what it is. But I love it when
I
the
have a
Protestants say, yeah, Jesus says you have to be born of water and the Spirit. So the first birth is referring to the being born in the amniotic fluid. I mean, is that not the craziest thing to say? They're
oh,
like,
that's the water there.
yeah, they
Yep.
say that's your first birth, there's water, and then your second birth is in the Spirit. That's what they say. You never heard that before?
That is very silly.
But then how? But then if you have to be
Jesus is
born of,
saying you have to be born in amniotic fluid. All right, Nicodemus, get it
but
done.
you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just thinking, like, well, if man is born through that fluid or whatnot, just born through that, and he comes into this world, and that's what Jesus is talking about, then it doesn't. Wouldn't it make sense that for the second birth, you have to also be washed from water or go through water to receive that second life, right?
I mean, logically, of course, yeah, but
Their
they're
But then,
their
but
logic.
they're not.
I'm saying that. I'm saying that just because, like, when they give that interpretation, like they're probably leaving that detail out. If I'm right, I think they're leaving that detail out then, because it makes sense. Like on an earthly sense, sure, you may go through your mother's womb or whatnot, and you come into this world, and if that's what Jesus is talking about, and then he goes into talking about being born of the Spirit. Well, how does that happen? Well, on the earthly sense, if they're trying to make it the earthly sense, going through the mother's womb, that's like the first birth, like through that water. Then, if you're gonna be born of the Spirit, so something spiritual, then wouldn't you also have to go through water as well?
They want to make it two separate things. It's the same logic as those people who read the verses where Paul will say something like, "Our God and Savior," and they'll say, "Oh, that's talking about God the Father and Jesus," and say, "No, it's our God and Savior. It's one person. He's our God and He is our Savior." And they're like, "Yeah, when He says be born of water and the Spirit, that's talking about two different births." No, it's talking about one birth, being born of water and the Spirit. You have to be born again of water and the Spirit. It's not.
Yeah, if they were going to be consistent and try and twist it, and it just means your physical birth, You could just say, "Oh yeah, you're born from the embryonic fluid, and then you breathe in breath, and that's the spirit, and that's being born of water and spirit." But of course, that then you
Okay,
know
I'm going to
someone
bed.
can just
Too much pain
change.
for me. All right, good night. That was very nice talking to you.
But kind of real quick, I have a question, sort of separate. Another symbolic thing is, could we say that the like uh, does the earth in a way symbolize like the church, like the temple of God?
It represents mankind,
Hmm.
all of
I only
mankind.
think about that because of the and well a couple of reasons, but the shepherd or Hermes talking about the tower is upon the waters, and it reminded me of the earth being brought forth on the waters, and the earth is a is on the waters, right? And I just drew that.
The earth has multiple symbolic layers to it. Everything does. Earth represents all of mankind, and it is also even symbolic of a single soul. You could think of the earth as representing your soul personally, Adriano.
Mhm.
That when it's overrun with wild animals, it symbolizes a mind, a soul being overrun with all kinds of evil impulses, thoughts, and
Yes.
actions. And so it has to be washed. All the craziness has to be washed right off, sanctified. So yeah, everything has multiple layers, but I don't begin to understand all the layers.
Yeah. I remember reading that in Origin's homily on Genesis. So that was a cool how he makes that connection.
Yes, first time you read Origen's homilies on Genesis, you think Origen's out of his mind. You just think this is way too much. Second time you read it, at least for me, it was like, wow, have I ever read this before? This is all so unique. I don't remember reading any of this. This is interesting though. And third time you read it, you go, oh my goodness, Origen is the most brilliant person. Where did he get this wisdom? At least that's how it was for me. Now, Nolan would say, Luke, you're crazy. First time I read it, I was already at stage 3. But I needed a process. It was all just so beyond me when I was reading Origin, his commentaries on Genesis. I think that was the first one of the first ones I read that was just a little bit too much for me to handle. So I sympathize with anybody who struggles with the deep allegorical understandings.
I love it. I love all the allegory. I think it's great. I think I like that these these literal events having like a parallel allegory in it. It makes it that much deeper, you know.
Well,
And
it's clear as you grow in wisdom, Origin isn't creating any of this. I mean, it's just God. God put all this stuff in here, and
yeah,
it's just up to us to find it. But Origin's not brilliant enough to create it. He's just noticing it.
yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm going to bed, guys. It was very good talking to you. God be with you.
Oh,
Oh, yes,
hold on a
Kevon.
sec.
All right, you're the
Is
second person.
is Aramis there?
He is right here. Did you want to speak to him?
Uh, can you hear me?
Aramis, they want to talk to you. Tune in.
Yeah, it's just a quick thing.
Um, well, I don't know if Aramis feels like. Oh, click it, Aramis. Come on. Kevon wants to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, Aramis, it's quick. I don't know if you heard that my conversation earlier with Luke. Did you? Oh, he's muted.
Oh, he's muted. Oh, but anyway, no, he didn't hear. But Aramis, he's telling you it's your job to make sure I spend at least 1 hour a day working on that book. Do you spend at least an hour a day working on it? I didn't
Yeah,
today or yesterday, but I will tomorrow.
yeah, at least an hour a day working on the novel. I'm not there to keep him accountable. You're my only.
An hour a
You're
day
my,
keeps the Kevon away.
yep.
Kevon, I want to finish it. I will. Thank you for the push. All right, farewell, guys. I'll see you tomorrow or whenever. Lord be
Alrighty.
with you. Bye.
God
God
bless.
bless.
God bless.